Welcome back to the Gourmet Gambit. Choucroute Garnie, or should I say Garnished Sauerkraut. One of the most famous dishes of the region of Lorraine and especially Alsace, served with many different meats and charcuterie. The Alsatian sauerkraut has become very famous all around the world. And to really have a good sauerkraut, it needs some techniques and some special cooking. The first thing we can do is getting a little bit familiar with the meats and the charcuterie. Some meats that go in, that's going to cook in the sauerkraut from the beginning, and others have a lower cooking time, so I'm going to explain that a little bit to you. These are salted pork shoulder. You have to desalt them by putting them in cold water the night before, change the water 2 or 3 times and leave them overnight. Smoked pork hock. I don't have to desalt these ones because they are going to salt our sauerkraut. Smoked sirloin, you can also use smoked loin. In the province of Alsace they call it kassler. We got some cooked pork belly in for the last 20 minutes in the sauerkraut. Smoked sausages, these are Montbéliard smoked sausages. They only have to cook 30 minutes in the sauerkraut. These are Morteau sausages. They also have to cook only 30 minutes. This is garlic sausage. We're going to put these at the end in slices, the last 10 to 5 minutes on the sauerkraut. These are cervelas, needs just some warming up in water, but you have to avoid the boiling point. So the best thing is to get your temperature at 75 degrees Celsius, if not they're going to burst open. And you got the Alsatian knacki, you can also use Frankfurter Wurst. These are the same, you have to warm them up in warm water, 70 to 5 degrees. If they go to the boiling point, they burst open. There is a lot of choice about meat and charcuterie. You can also use raw pork belly. There's a lot of other meat and a lot of other charcuterie that you can use in there. So it all depends on what country you are and what you can find. So as I said earlier, the salted shoulder, we're going to put them in cold water and we're going to leave them overnight. Changing the water 2 or 3 times is okay. Always cold water, of course. Now you need raw sauerkraut, and I would advise you to have a little taste of this raw sauerkraut. And this is just to find out the acidity of your sauerkraut. Now we're in the first week of December, so the sauerkraut hasn't been fermenting for a long time. So I'm not going to rinse this sauerkraut because I'm going to lose most of the acidity. You can choose any potatoes you like. This time of year we got these little La Rotte potatoes. They're really lovely, tasty. We eat them with the skin, but as for you, choose the potatoes you like. Some traditional recipes are with beer, white wine or champagne. I'm going to use a good beer and a good Riesling just to have a nice balance. As for the method of cooking, you can use a pot on the stove and let it simmer slowly, and I prefer to do it in the oven. The onions, cut them in half, cut them in fine slices, and then in half again. The garlic, very fine chop, into little bits. Duck or goose fat, frying pan on maximum heat. The onions. When you see it becomes lightly brown, add the garlic. Just stir the garlic through the onions. And we're going to cut the heat and we're going to let it cool down. Then we're going to add some of our ingredients and spices to our sauerkraut. The onions and the garlic. The bay leaves. Caraway seeds. And of course our juniper berries. And we're going to mix this all up. We're going to prepare our oven dish. Use any dish you like. It just needs to be deep and big enough to get the sauerkraut and the meat in. Now, as you can see on the ingredients list, we're talking about an ingredients list for 4 persons. And you might have noticed that I got a lot more of meat and sauerkraut, because mine is going to be for 8 to 10 persons. So always refer to the ingredients list. It's going to take me about the double of the time to get all the meat done. The best thing about sauerkraut is that the longer it cooks, the better it gets. We're going to start up with some sauerkraut. Put in some smoked sirloin. So we're going to put the rest of our sauerkraut on there. We're going to add the beer and the white wine. Push it a little bit under, a little bit more. We're also going to add a few tablespoons of duck or goose fat. Of course, this is one of the French real winter dishes, but I could eat this any time of the year, believe me. And in the oven, 180 degrees. I don't preheat the oven, so it's all going to heat up evenly, and it's gone for the first 2 hours. After 2 hours of cooking, we're going to check out our meat. So the smoked ham hock needs at least another half an hour of cooking. And we got our smoked sirloin, and this one is beautifully done, really tender, juices are coming out a bit, so we're going to preserve this. The ham hock back in for another half an hour. So as you can see, the cooking time all depends on the meat, so if you really got a meal for 10 persons, you better start off in the morning. We're also going to put a little bit more beer and wine to get it up to level, and back in the oven she goes. So we're going to have a look again, and this time it's really well done. It does not have to fall from the bone, but you can see as the bone is coming out that it's all nicely done, and it's still got some consistency. So we're going to take some of our sauerkraut out to put in the pork shoulder. You see how all the meat juices are getting into the sauerkraut, and this is going to make our sauerkraut really tender, and it's also going to take away a lot of sourness. And we're going to put our sauerkraut back in. Pour some water if needed, up to the right level. Back in the oven again. Rinse your potatoes well in cold water. Then fill up your pan with cold water. You always start cooking potatoes in cold water. A little bit of salt if you want, not necessarily. Maximum heat, bring your potatoes to the boiling point. Once at the boiling point, you might need 10 minutes to cook them, and they're done. So we're going to have a look how the pork shoulder is going. It needs another half an hour. We're going to stir the sauerkraut a little bit, and we're going to put it back in the oven. We're also going to pour a little bit more water on there, so we always have to avoid the sauerkraut to dry out. So time to get our pork shoulder out. Again, we're going to take off most of the sauerkraut, and this is the same thing. We want the pork shoulder to be tender, but we don't want it to fall off from the bone. We're going to put our pork belly in there, the morto sausages, and the smoked sausages. Put our sauerkraut back in there. Now this sauerkraut becomes really beautiful. It absorbs all the meat juices. It is going to be really smooth. It's just fantastic the way it goes. So now we're going to lower the oven heat up to 150 degrees Celsius, 160 degrees Celsius maximum. I'm back in the oven for half an hour. The smoked sirloin is going to be cut in nice slices, 6 to 8 millimeters. And that's all going to be warmed up, half an hour for serving. We're also going to slice the garlic sausage, 6-7 millimeters, and this is going to be warmed up the last 10 minutes with the sauerkraut. Here's a good trick for serverlas or serverlat and our Alsatian gnocchi. You start off with cold water, and we're going to warm it up on medium fire, just up to 75 degrees Celsius. And then you take off the heat and you just let it in the warm water for 5 to 10 minutes, and it's ready to serve. We're almost at 60 degrees, and you can see that the knockwurst is starting to get to the surface, which means they're almost ready. So I'm at 71 degrees, and I'm going to stop the fire 5 to 10 minutes and they're ready. And you don't take the risk your sausages are going to burst. Now it's time to get our sausages out. So with the oven at 150 degrees Celsius, our smoked sausages are not going to burst. Our beautiful Morteau sausages and this beautiful pork belly. Half an hour before serving, warm up all your meat, the sauerkraut in the oven, 150 degrees, and you're ready to go. The old style, traditional cooking, this is quite a job to do. My sauerkraut has been cooking for 6 hours, but of course it was meant for 8 to 10 persons, and I got a lot of different meats, but this is really the Alsatian family dish. For me, it's amazing superfood. Serve your sauerkraut with your homemade traditional Dijon mustard. You got the recipe on my channel page. And all that's left to say, my dear friends, bon appetit and see you back soon.